The first thing I remember was the smell of disinfectant and the faint hum of machines. I sat there in the cold light of the emergency room hallway in Dallas, Texas, my body aching from head to toe. My hands, the same hands that had lifted bricks and steel for years, now trembled uncontrollably. Blood had dried under my fingernails. My chest throbbed with pain, but the ache in my heart was far worse. Behind those frosted glass doors, my two little angels, Liam and Sophie, were fighting for their lives. Just a few hours earlier, I had been living a dream. It was supposed to be a beautiful Sunday. My wife, Clara, and I had planned a family picnic. I can still see her that morning, her auburn hair glowing in the kitchen light, her soft laugh echoing through the house. She was packing sandwiches and cookies while I brewed coffee. Liam was tossing his toy football in the air, talking about how he'd beat me in our next game. Sophie was tugging at my jeans, asking to be lifted up. Her laughter was pure sunlight. Clara kissed my cheek and said, "This is going to be our perfect day." And for a while, it was. We drove out in my old Chevy pickup, windows down, the Texas wind rushing through. Clara reached for my hand, and I remember her saying, "I love you, Jackson." Liam and Sophie were singing along to the radio in the backseat, their laughter filling every mile between us and the park. At Riverside Park, we spread a checkered blanket under a wide pecan tree. I grilled while Clara chased the kids, her laughter as bright as the sun above us. Liam's football hit my leg, and we both broke into laughter. Sophie gathered dandelions and handed them to Clara, calling them flowers for the prettiest lady in the world. I remember thinking, if heaven looked like anything, it had to look like this. As the day faded, we packed up and started home. The sky was painted with orange and pink streaks. Liam said from the back seat, "Best day ever, Dad," and Sophie yawned, resting her head on his shoulder. Clara was humming softly beside me. I felt at peace. Then, everything changed in a heartbeat. I saw the headlights before I heard the roar. A semi-truck, swerving across the median, heading straight for us. I shouted, "Clara, hold the kids," and yanked the wheel. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the world spun out of control. I heard Clara's cry, the kids' screams, and then silence. When I came to, the air smelled of gasoline. The truck was upside down, its front crushed. My head throbbed, blood trickled into my eyes. I crawled toward the wreck, calling their names, Clara, Liam, Sophie. Clara was lying on the road, her body still. I lifted her head onto my lap. Her eyes fluttered open, trying to focus on me. I kept whispering, "Stay with me, please." But her breath was fading, her skin turning cold. I begged her not to go, but she slipped away right there in my arms. Sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet asphalt. Paramedics rushed in, pulling Liam and Sophie from the wreckage. They were alive, but barely. I was numb, broken, a ghost of myself as they pushed me into the ambulance. The next few hours blurred together. At the hospital, I sat outside the operating room, staring at the doors that separated me from my children. I kept hearing Clara's last breath in my ears, over and over. Every time a nurse walked by, I hoped for news, but none came. I signed papers with hands still stained with her blood. Guilt tore at me. Why hadn't I seen the truck sooner? Why hadn't I driven another route? When night fell, the rain started. I watched it slide down the window, every drop echoing the tears. I couldn't stop. That's when I heard footsteps. Two figures approached, the last people I wanted to see. Reginald Vanderbilt and his wife, Vivian, Clara's parents. Wealthy, proud, and cold. They had never accepted me, a construction worker, as worthy of their daughter. Reginald's voice boomed through the corridor. "What have you done?" he shouted. "You destroyed my daughter's life. My grandchildren are lying in there because of you." Vivian glared at me, her voice sharp as glass. We warned Clara that you'd bring her nothing but pain. And now she's gone because of you. I didn't fight back. I couldn't. I just stood there, head bowed, tears running down my face. Every word they said hit me like a hammer. Reginald said they'd handle the funeral and didn't want me there. Vivian turned away, saying, "You're not family to us." When they left, I fell to the floor. I remembered the first time I met Clara, how her car had broken down near my construction site. I'd helped fix it, and she'd laughed, saying, "You're not what I expected." From that day, she never cared about our differences. Her family had threatened to cut her off, but she chose love over comfort. For 8 beautiful years, we built a life together. 3 days after the crash, I lost Liam. The doctors said they did everything they could. I remember holding his small, lifeless hand, whispering that Daddy was sorry. That moment shattered whatever strength I had left. Sophie was still fighting, her tiny body connected to more tubes than I could count. The hospital bills piled up, numbers that seemed impossible. I sold everything I owned, the truck, our furniture, even Clara's jewelry. Still, it wasn't enough. Desperate, I went to the Vanderbilts' mansion. I stood on their marble steps, soaked in rain, and begged. "Please," I said, "Sophie needs another surgery. I'll pay you back, I swear." Reginald just stared, his eyes empty. "This is your fault. Don't come here again." Vivian's words were colder than the rain. "You've already taken enough from us." I walked away, soaked and defeated. When I got back to the hospital, I didn't even have a home anymore. The bungalow Clara and I had built was gone. They'd evicted me while I was still begging for help. So I slept in the hospital parking lot. By day, I worked at construction sites, my body aching but my heart clinging to hope. By night, I cleaned floors just to keep up with Sophie's medical bills. Every time I walked past the ICU window, I whispered, "Daddy's here, baby. Hold on." Days turned into weeks. I stopped eating, stopped talking. The world was gray, until one rainy evening, when I heard a voice behind me, "Jackson, son." I turned and there he was, my father, Harlan. I hadn't seen him in years. His eyes were tired, but warm. He walked up and pulled me into a hug, something I hadn't felt since I was a boy. "You're not alone anymore," he said, and in that moment, for the first time since the crash, I felt a spark of life return. When my father wrapped his arms around me that night, something inside me broke, and something else began to heal. For months, I had carried the weight of my world alone, believing there was no one left to stand beside me. But in that rain-soaked parking lot, my father's voice cut through the darkness like dawn. We sat in his old truck for hours. I told him everything: the accident, Clara's last breath, Liam's loss, the Vanderbilt's cruelty, and how Sophie's life now depended on surgeries I couldn't afford. He listened without interrupting, his face lined with sorrow. When I finally fell silent, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Son, there's something I need to tell you." I looked at him, confused. He continued, "You've always known me as a retired dock worker. That was only part of the truth. I co-founded Hale Maritime, one of the biggest shipping companies in the Gulf. I stepped away years ago, because I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of hard work, not relying on wealth." I stared at him in disbelief. My entire life, I'd thought we were an average family. But in that moment, I realized my father had built an empire quietly, teaching me through struggle rather than privilege. "You mean, you could have helped me this whole time?" I asked, my voice trembling between anger and relief. He nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes. But I needed you to find your strength first. And you did, Jackson. You've endured the unthinkable and kept going, for your daughter. Now, let me help." The next morning, everything changed. My father's network moved swiftly. The best surgeons in Texas were called in for Sophie's treatment. Within hours, her medical bills were cleared, her surgery approved, and a team of specialists stood ready. I stayed by her bedside through every second of the operation, whispering prayers. When the doctor finally emerged and said, "She's stable. She's going to make it," I fell to my knees in gratitude. Days later, Sophie opened her eyes. Her voice was faint, but she smiled. "Daddy, are we going home soon?" I held her hand and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home." After weeks in the hospital, my father took us to his estate outside Dallas. The moment we drove through the gates, I was speechless. The place wasn't just a house, it was a haven. A sprawling villa surrounded by oak trees, with warm light spilling from every window. My mother, Margaret, stood at the door, her arms wide open. She embraced me and Sophie, as if she'd been waiting forever. "You're safe now," she whispered. For the first time since the accident, I slept peacefully, but peace alone wasn't enough. I still couldn't forget what the Vanderbilts had done, how they'd turned their backs when I needed them most, how they'd mocked my pain. My father must have sensed it, because one evening, he called me into his study. The room smelled of cedar and old books, and the walls were lined with portraits of ships, each one marked Hail Maritime. He handed me a folder thick with documents. "I've been investigating the Vanderbilts for years," he said. "They're not as untouchable as they pretend to be." I flipped through the papers, bank statements, forged invoices, and charity records riddled with inconsistencies. My father explained, "They've been laundering money through Vivian's charity foundations and hiding assets overseas." I was waiting for the right time to expose them. Now, it's time. At first, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted revenge. But another part wanted justice, for Clara, for Liam, for every moment they had stolen from us. So I agreed to help. Over the next few weeks, my father and I worked side by side, gathering every piece of evidence. He contacted reporters he trusted, men and women who valued truth over influence. Within days, the story broke across Texas: Vanderbilt shipping scandal, corruption and fraud exposed. The news spread like wildfire. Stock prices collapsed overnight. Their empire began to crumble under the weight of their lies. Reginald and Vivian called press conferences, trying to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Cameras captured their every stumble, their every contradiction. For the first time, the world saw them as they truly were. Soon, the authorities stepped in. Federal agents raided their offices. Vivian's charities were audited, and millions of dollars in misused funds were uncovered. Arrest warrants followed. Reginald Vanderbilt, the man who had called me worthless, was led out of his mansion in handcuffs. When I saw the footage on the news, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt peace. Justice had found them, not through vengeance, but through truth. Weeks later, their estate was auctioned to pay off debts and penalties. My father bought it quietly, not to flaunt wealth, but to rebuild something meaningful. He turned it into a home for Sophie and me. The same marble halls that once echoed with arrogance now rang with laughter and hope. I started working at Hail Maritime soon after, not because I was his son, but because I wanted to earn my place. The first day I stepped onto the docks in my safety vest, the salty air hit my face, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. I started as a dock supervisor, then rose through dedication and experience. I learned to manage teams, negotiate contracts, and handle international shipments. The more I worked, the more I realized that my father hadn't just given me opportunity, he'd given me redemption. Years passed, and Sophie grew stronger. Her laughter filled every corner of our home. She inherited her mother's kindness and courage. Sometimes, I'd find her sitting under the old pecan tree we'd planted in the yard, whispering to the wind as if talking to her mom. It reminded me that love never truly dies. It just changes shape. One autumn afternoon, I took Sophie to visit my parents' original home, a simple wooden house surrounded by golden leaves. My father sat on the porch, whittling a small wooden bird, while my mother prepared tea inside. Sophie ran around chasing butterflies, her laughter blending with the rustling wind. As I watched her, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain, the loss, the humiliation, and the healing. Life had taken everything from me, only to return something greater, wisdom. I turned to my father and said, "You were right. Strength isn't built in comfort. It's built when everything falls apart, and you still choose to stand." He smiled softly. "And you did, son. You rose." That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, I held Sophie close and whispered, "We made it, sweetheart. Your mom would be proud." And in that quiet moment, I finally understood the truth that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Real wealth isn't money or power, it's love, courage, and the ability to rebuild when the world crumbles around you.